Helene, welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. I think it'll show everybody that you definitely deserve to be on a Leaders Who Care keyword series. So I think an excellent way to start, as always, is if you could briefly introduce yourself, not so much the business side, we'll get into that, but tell us who you are as a person, where you're from, where you live now, family. You can even say maybe something you've never told anybody in the world. You want to have this platform to reveal that to the world. Anything like that. You know, your favorite color, dogs, a little bit about you. So share a little bit.
Sure. So many choices. Well, I think I'd like to start with the fact that I'm a native New Yorker. That's a lot of who I am. And I've only ever lived out of New York City once for a little while when I lived in New Jersey, but I've traveled extensively. I am really curious about science. I am an engineer that likes to think big and get things done. I'm a mom. I have two kids. I believe in healthcare, and that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. So you were born in New York?
Yes, native New Yorker.
Love it. We had that in Miami when I lived there, and it was more not native Miamians. So they ended up doing bumper stickers for the natives that they put on native Miamians, so people would know that they're from there. So what were you? I always love to know, what were you like as a kid or a teenager? Did you have like a passion for creating new things? Did you eat your veggies or did you feed them to the dog? Did you play sports or music? What were you like?
So as a kid, I really loved science. I was one of those kids who really just liked to find bugs and like find rocks and take things apart. And I also just loved, in fact, a story my mom always tells is when I was like 5, I brought home a book from the library about the life of bees, and it was like a textbook level. And she was like, I can't believe you wanted me to read that. And then when I started to read myself, I got lost in books. And she used to say that the whole house could be burning down and I wouldn't notice until the book went on fire. So, so that was my world. I feel like I got a lot of my imagination from the reading and the worlds that I visited in books. And but I also loved to run and ride my bicycle. And I heard somebody say that if you want to find happiness, you should do the things that you loved when you were 8 years old. And so now I do triathlons. So I got the running, the biking, and the swimming, and that really makes me happy.
No, that's like spectacular. Do you think it would have been different if, because I saw this thing with babies, not babies, like toddlers, and they gave a toddler a book and he was trying to slide on the book. Do you think it would have been different for you?
Well, it's funny because I gave books to my kids like crazy and also kept electronics away from them until they were older. And I think that there's something visceral about, touching a book and reading it and,
Right.
having the exposure to like the colors and the ideas. And that's different than an electronic experience. So I really appreciate books, although I have to say I don't find enough time to read now. And it's one of those things that it for me, it's not the same on a tablet either. It's like, I prefer an actual book.
Yeah, I think it summarized that in a way. It's great to have the technology to do it different ways, but it doesn't mean you have to give up the feel of that book and the sensory from it. It is pretty cool. Tell us a little bit about your journey, early journey. You went from chemical engineering at Manhattan College, executive MBA in New York at NYU Stern, and then you went to major pharma. What was your motivation for those majors, which you've kind of intimated a little bit there, and then to enter major pharma?
Sure. So I started out really loving biology. And then in high school, I had a teacher that really kindled my love for chemistry. So then when I went to college, my parents actually wanted me to be a doctor. And it was interesting to me, but I actually saw open heart surgery, and I was like, I don't want the enormity of being, responsible for someone's life.
Well,
So in college, I took all the prerequisites for med school, but in the chemical engineering program, and had 4 years to figure out how to let my parents know that I was going to disappoint them and not be a doctor.
4 years. All right.
Yeah.
The hope alive, but
Yeah. So it was really, I loved chemical engineering. It was so pragmatic, so hands-on. And then I was out in the workforce for quite some time as an engineer, and I got to the point where I felt like I had so many big projects that I completed, and I was looking for what's next. And I went back to school briefly for my master's of engineering, and I took a project management course of all things. And I was like, I think I need to understand how my projects fit into the context of the business. And that's what led me to pursue my executive MBA at Stern. And also my company then would currently, financed me to go to the program. And it was just so intense. And the best part about it was that you really learn from your classmates. So when I was there, I was in these intense project teams. We did projects where we traveled to China. We studied the airline industry and went to Boeing and Airbus, and it was just this immersive experience. And while I was there, I actually met a number of colleagues who worked in pharmaceutical companies, and we did some case studies about an industry where there's so much at risk, and so much cost, and the long cycle of the research, and it fascinated me. So when I had an opportunity to join Pfizer, I was really excited to say, how can I bring a lot of my process optimization and knowledge of the consumer to pharma? And the role that I had there was optimizing clinical supplies for phase 3B4, and I was able to apply a lot of those skills. But it was also where I started to see that it really is a big business that is not completely focused on the patient and the patient experience. So that was kind of the beginning of the my, let's say, thoughts that you could do it a different way.
yeah, it's interesting. I was speaking to another professional woman who was in pharma, and I asked her, how did you balance, or what was your thought process going into pharma, an industry where they've had amazing discoveries, amazing impact in a lot of different ways, but they've also been under a lot of criticism for different things too. Were your thoughts around both of those?
Yes, and I mean, one of the things that's so important is that the breakthroughs in science and healthcare that pharma has been responsible for are invaluable. So I know that a lot of the criticism is about the money that's spent, but the money that's spent is necessary to make sure that these products are safe and effective. And I think that it's not so much about criticizing that the industry isn't trying to make things better, because if you see what happened during the pandemic and the ability to fast track development,
Right.
it's really saying, how can we use these new models to take this essential, piece of helping humankind and just make it better and faster, and especially access to more people. I think that's the thing that's really important. And one of the things I'm really interested in is reducing bias in research, because that's where I think the whole industry could be more effective and get a better reputation, versus people thinking that it's all about the money.
Yeah, you would have thought that they would have had diverse testing, clinical trials, and whatnot, just because what do they say? Don't waste a good disaster, or something, is one of the insane expression. You got to learn from it, or else it's really a tragedy. So it looks like you shifted to but I guess what I would call an entrepreneurial executive during your Go Smile time. When and how did that idea light bulb go off?
So actually, this is one of those things where never let a good crisis go by.
That's it.
So when I was at Pfizer, I was in a global group that got reorganized into a US organization, and there was a lot of restructuring, and my entire group got downsized. So it was the first time that I was ever in this experience where, I was looking for work. And I think that I never would have been open to like a new and different opportunity if I wasn't, in this like moment of consideration that I could really think about like doing something different. So a recruiter reached out to me for the particular role. And when I found out about it, I was like, well, this is an opportunity to make a bigger impact in a small place. And the company actually needed a lot of regulatory assistance. Let's just say that. So I walked in. The job was really interesting to me. I was hired by the inventor and the founder, and on my first day, I was handed the red folder of things that needed to be fixed.
Nice.
So it was trial by fire. It was like, there isn't an expert down the hall that you can just go talk to. So I had to leverage my network and figure things out. And, it was even like, because you're worried about burn rate, like we were even bartering products for different services we needed. So it was an incredible education, and really the basis of me learning that you can have a virtual company. So like we had a fully virtual supply chain. It was really a marketing organization that did all the external, product development and supply chain and everything. And that formed the basis of a lot of things that I did later at GSK with open innovation, at New Avon when I restructured, when we separated from Avon Products International to the US organization. So that learning was really about how do you build a collaborative ecosystem, and benefited me so much later on.
Yeah, you kind of pretty well answered what I was going to ask next, and you reminded me when you said there's no like person down the hall that you can talk to, and we also do a lot of searches with respect to startups, and there's a lot of people in corporate say, I'd love to work for a startup, and so well, I talk to them. Do you really know? Yeah, I know exactly. And so, well, what do you do now when your computer goes down? Well, I have my old IT department, of course. And so, well, you don't have an IT department anymore. And smart people, but don't necessarily really know what you have to. And I was going to ask you, where did your savvy and instinct come from with respect to Go Smile to GSK to Avon about how to transform, what these businesses are about, how to transform them to be more efficient and scale? Was it all from the learning? It had to be go back to the kid thing, some instinctive intuitiveness as well.
Well, I think that one of the things that's really great about chemical engineering education is that really, when you look at process optimization, everything's a process. So like one of the first things, and in some of the roles I've had, I did a lot of restructuring. So the first thing is to look at, like do a gap analysis, like what's going wrong, what's going right, where are the areas that, can be impacted. So that's always like my first assessment, like walking into a situation. And, often there's a sense of, we have to do everything ourselves is another piece. So like assessing what is the core competency of the company, and like what needs to be held internally versus what can you do virtually or outsource or through partners and make things more efficient and faster and flexible. So some of the common thread through things I've done is that, at my core, I'm still like an engineer. So it's always like looking at how we can be more efficient about things, which is helpful. But then on the other side, it's like, who's your customer? Really knowing who that customer is, understanding what is valuable to them. Because I've also seen a lot of, especially technical people, like really developing products and saying, this is absolutely the best technology, and like we're going to continue to improve this, but the customer doesn't care.
Right.
So at that point, you're like making something for yourself.
That's it's a great point. That's why the engineers and the tech people have to talk to the commercialization people and see what works. So was it the entrepreneur and or engineer in you who sought different opportunities after about 2 to 3 years? Because there was a period there where so many people, to be honest, tech people, engineering people, that were looking for new things all the time. Was it the initiatives were complete? Was it you were itchy to get onto something new? What was it?
Yeah, it's funny that it's insightful. Like there was a period where I was doing a lot of 2 to 3 year job transitions. And I think some of it is that that's the cycle of change. So especially in innovation roles, it goes with the territory that there's an issue, there's a burning need to do things differently. And like in that process, we're all assess it and create some options and then create a plan. Generally, it's like a 2 year transition to get from the place you were to the new place.
Right.
And in many of the roles that I had, it was really to eliminate my position. So in a sense, you could say that it was the engineer that made it end and the entrepreneur who found the new one.
Yeah, not so unusual. You're right. And, there's a lot of people I found that way that were also just, bored at a certain point, and they needed to move on to that next project. So not a surprise, and actually kind of exciting that you can move from one thing to another as well. It's, I would think it'd be super exciting. We founded Fifth Element on the foundation, on the basis of leaders in their businesses can do way better when they're doing good. So share with us your shift in thinking from the time you were in pharma, and then also how you knew and co-founded Upgrade with Justin Kameen, who we know too, another of our leaders who care, I may add. So describe how you're making an impact and then describe by how you're making an impact by making food as medicine easy and equally accessible.
Sure. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, I spent a lot of time in the big pharma world. And I think the first moment of consideration for me where things changed is when I was pregnant. And I was really scrutinizing every single product that I used, every single piece of food that I put in my mouth, and in particular, the over-the-counter drugs. So I started to look at that, and these are products that everyone thinks are innocuous, right? And in a way, I was my eyes were open that there are other ways to get to health and wellness, and in particular, not being reactive. So in the pharma mindset, it's really there is a disease or a condition, and then there's a remedy for it versus taking a proactive, preventative approach to healthcare. So in that period, I started to explore that there were some botanical extracts that are really efficacious. But then I became VP of R&D at Nature's Bounty and realized that there are some products that have benefit, but because of the DSHEA regulations and the fact that you can't really engage people about disease state, and that the requirements, the FDA is focused more on safety than efficacy. So the ability of a consumer to choose a good supplement is really difficult because there are so many things that can impact the efficacy of a supplement product. So when I was in this mindset, actually, when Justin Kameen reached out to me, which was a cold call on LinkedIn. So he
I didn't know
reached out.
that.
Yeah, it was really incredible because there was something about like the way he was talking in the invitation. I was like, "What? Well, let's go meet." And we actually had a cup of tea at the Rubin Museum in Manhattan, which is a lovely little spot. And he said to me, "Why hasn't anyone made organic Advil?" And because he had, being a soccer player and had seen his teammates just taking handfuls of Advil. It's so bad for you. And I said, well, but you can't, because there are no natural remedies or botanical extracts that are fast acting pain relievers. It's just, they don't work that way in the body. So, but we continued to talk, and he really, one of the things that stood out is he said that he wants to do good things with good people. And I just, I went away from that conversation saying, there is definitely a needs base here. Like I've seen that, and in fact, I used to go to Cosmoprof, which is a big show in Europe when I was Chief Innovation Officer at New Avon, and in the 2 or 3 years that I went there, there was a natural section that just exploded in size. So when I first went, it was just a small corner of the show. So there is definitely consumer interest that, you know, increasing in this area. People are looking for alternative remedies that are more natural. And so I started to do some research, and I found some efficacious compounds, and came up with the first formulation within a couple of weeks of talking to Justin. And within 6 months of that first conversation, we were on the market with our first product, which is Perform Daily Inflammation. And of course, it's not a fast-acting pain reliever, but it relieves aches and soreness, and really it's a chronic inflammation in the body. So it was really exciting. And, you know, to me, the rewarding part is the stories of people telling us how the product improved their lives. One 80-year-old woman at my gym who has got back to swimming, all these things that she loved to do, because her range of motion was so improved. So like that. And then the second product that we made actually was inspired by my mother, who I had type 2 diabetes, and I watched her struggle with that, and she eventually lost her eyesight. So that product was Control Glucose, and to help people moderate their blood glucose levels. So where it's just the impact of the products is really giving people a tool to help them stay in their healthy lifestyle, because obviously no product in isolation is going to be enough, but it has to be part of diet, exercise, good sleep, reducing your stress. So these products are just an extra tool in your toolkit to help keep you on that lifestyle.
Yeah, that's amazing. We base our whole firm on how impact and talent work in harmony and everything, and for sustainable results. And we actually know Robert Levine very well. I don't know if you know that name. He was married to Mary Tyler Moore, and he's a cardiologist. And she had diabetes, and they were trying to prevent her from losing her eyesight and everything. And in fact, maybe even a good introduction for you to know him for what you're doing. Is that under the Mend or Upgrade or the merged company?
So we did merge with Mend. So now all of the products are in the Mend portfolio. And it was really an exciting opportunity, because the mission of Mend was very much aligned with Upgrade. And in fact, our portfolios and our business models were so complementary, because the Mend products were really focused on the orthopedic space, and it sold through doctors and hospitals, and mainly for acute interventions, whereas the Upgrade products were more like for chronic need states. Like, so I mentioned Control Glucose for blood sugar control, Perform for inflammation, and those naturally fit with people. Like after an acute use, then you try and get them on a healthy lifestyle, ongoing. So that was a perfect fit. And also Upgrade was working on a digital component, like for behavioral support, and that actually suited itself so much better to the hospital environment. So when the two companies came together, we have all of the products in the portfolio that span acute to chronic needs. And now we have a digital intervention that's in the hospitals that's called Upgrade by Mend. So it's like, here's your Mend products, and upgrade them with this digital experience.
I love it. I also like the fact that you talk about innovation. You're creating innovation for putting people first with a focus on prevention and transparency. In a weird way, it reminds me of a Jay Leno joke where he says he looks at every bottle, he's trying to find the best vitamins and this and that and the food, and make sure the can's not open and the toothpaste not open and everything. And yet some guy comes around the supermarket with something on a toothpick, and he takes it and eats it right away. Without knowing what the hell it is at all. We certainly got to go more down the prevention mark. Can you tell us how that becomes both, how you manage to make that economically and socially impactful?
Sure. Prevention is really hard to prove, is part of the issue. And I think that that's one of the stumbling blocks for value-based healthcare. So we're looking to use digital data to get out in front of trying to show that there's impact, but it's really a long path. Like that's something that is going to take a while to substantiate. But I think that it's really starting with getting people to take it one day at a time and see that these little changes that you make can make improvements.
Yeah, it's unfortunately you need metrics over X amount of years to show it. But I think deep down inside, just talking from my non-engineering, non-scientific mind, we know that prevention, it makes a whole lot of sense over just trying to, cure all the time. Little sideline here, we were launched, our firm, we were launched on International Women's Day, which is partly where our name comes from SDG 5 and Fifth Element. So we engage with a lot of leaders, always about diversity, whether any search we're doing or initiative, it's always diversity involved. Tell us a little bit about your journey as a woman in business, in life sciences, in CPG, how you navigated and thrived on that. You were engaged. How do you get the amazing initiatives to work on and get recognized for it? What was your journey like?
Sure. Actually, it's really interesting because, as a kid, I remember my parents always told me you can be anything you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other pieces, though, is they said you have great gifts and now you need to give back to the world. So that was a little bit of a responsibility. But I think that I went into the workforce really thinking that, I wasn't any different than anyone else. So I didn't expect that, like, I'm a woman engineer. I'm just an engineer. So and then I found myself in this like extremely male dominated arena and working in manufacturing plants, sometimes where they didn't even have facilities for women, which was interesting.
Yeah.
But I really thrived because I'm also a bit of a tomboy. So like I love to get in there and like, do hands-on things. And I gained the respect of the operators by like working alongside them, like lifting up heavy bags of chemicals and, like I got my forklift certification, by the way, like, so I could get in there and do whatever I needed to. So I think that early experience like taught me to lead diverse teams and to really understand where people are coming from. Because like there were a lot of times where I would have to explain a technical thing to an operator and make sure that they understood it and also were motivated to do the work we needed them to do. So that was a huge leadership experience for me early in my career. But then when I came back to more of a corporate role, I had to completely change my style. And I remember this one piece of feedback I'll never forget is that someone's told me that I was effective at getting things done, but people find you to be strident.
Strident.
And I was like, I had to look it up. And then I was like, oh, that's not a good thing.
That is such an unusual word to use.
Exactly. So that was, and it's a good thing I got the feedback when I did, because I was able to really assess my leadership and say, I think I adopted more of a servant leadership mindset from like moving forward and still do from there. And the most rewarding thing for me, especially, about being a woman leader is I didn't have any role models early on. So I had to like find this way myself. And when I got, more comfortable with like forming high performing teams and letting the team really take the forefront as you would in servant leadership, just clearing the barriers out of their way. And every time they've surprised me and surpassed all the expectations from the beginning. So that's really been the most rewarding for me as a woman leader.
Yeah, I've heard that from a few women as well, where let them do their thing, type of thing. And I hear that. I do a lot of sports analogies. I see that in sports all the time. If the player knows the coach believes in him or her, they'll do anything. Yep. Anything for that coach. What do you think? The last couple of questions on here. What do you think the responsibility is then for leaders, if you will, leaders who care, to care about the financial, the physical, and mental well-being of their employees?
So I think this is incredibly important, especially in a world where people are not trusting institutions any longer. and there isn't a lot of security. So I feel like, first of all, it just makes good business sense to take care of your employees, because then you have loyalty, and you can attract the best talent if you're providing benefits and looking out for their welfare. But one of the things in particular that we're doing at Mend is we're looking at all the stakeholders that we can help. And for the solution that I mentioned, where we have a digital intervention that's in the hospital, we're actually able to hire nurses to provide remote care. And it provides them with a much less stressful and more flexible job than being frontline workers. So it's been really rewarding to us to be able to look at everyone that we help through our solution. So obviously we're helping the patients, but we're helping these healthcare workers, we're helping the hospital systems become more efficient. So I feel like taking that view of the entire community and how a company can bring everyone together for the mutual benefit of all is really exciting. And I think what companies need to do to take a leadership in the world today.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because it's one of our criteria, if you will, for defining also, if you will, leaders who care and all the benefits that come from it. And what we also found, it's a larger discussion, is when people go home, spouses or partners or whatever go home, they have two things happen. They either go home and say, "Oh, I'm exhausted. The work sucks. Get me a beer. I'm going to sit on the sofa." Da, da, da. Or they come in the door and say, "Hey guys, got to sit down over dinner. I want to tell you what happened today. And you know, my boss really cares about me." Da, da, da. Or we're doing this thing with the World Food Program or whatever. That's pretty cool. And the kids hear that too. So if you want to talk about sustainability of well-being and sustainability of making an impact and good for business too, getting the kids thinking that early on, we saw really is another result of it. So good on you for that. Last question here. I joke around always saying in LA we say leave them wanting more so we can do a sequel. So there you go. A client told me in 2021, I thought it was really cool. He said, "Mark, you know, the year 2020 was the year that flew by slowly." And I thought, what a great way of describing it. And the last 3 years really have been interesting, would be an understatement. With all that, can you tell us what you're most grateful for and also what you're most hopeful for?
Sure. I think that I was really grateful for the time with my family. So all four of us were, stuck in our not so big New York City apartment. But it was this incredible time, because there for a while we were at the epicenter of the pandemic. So we were literally inside. We were not going anywhere, and we had different rhythms of living together 24/7 like that. And at first it was a little difficult. But then we settled into really just enjoying each other, and having this closeness and time to talk about deep topics that we wouldn't have gotten to otherwise. And then when we started to go back out again, it was like a reawakening of enjoying our city. So it was like when everything was taken away, it was uncertain if it would ever be back. And then when the city opened up again and we had all of the outdoor seating for the restaurants, it's really, the city is more vibrant now with all this outdoor seating. And it's so exciting to see that we've come through it and we're stronger for it.
And then with that, what are you most hopeful for?
I'm most hopeful for finding some sense of what's the new normal. I think that change is great, and I'm all about change, but I feel like there are so many things that it's uncertain, like where it's going to stop. And even from a business perspective, there's some of the things that were allowed because of the emergency use authorization for COVID, that even telemedicine, where it's like, are we going to keep being able to do this, so it leads to a certain amount of uncertainty. And I think that companies that are formed during a crisis or a downturn usually are the ones that are really strong and resilient, because we've gotten through all these ups and downs. But I think that a little more predictability would be nice, because having everything so volatile really makes it hard to plan. So I'm looking forward to having that be a little more stable, and just getting back to some travel, which I haven't been doing even yet.
No, I think you said it super well. So Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. And you've definitely shown that you are a leader who cares. And now I'm just hopeful that you can keep mending and upgrading us every single day, to be cute, if you will. So,
Yeah.
but thank you so much for that, and for making a difference out there.
Thank you.